Welcome, Mid-Missouri. Tonight's topic is emergency preparedness. We all remember where we were on September 11th, 2001. What a terrible day. It's kind of like the day when President Kennedy was shot. We all remember that day. In my case, I was at the Capitol at a meeting when it was first reported that a single-engine airplane had crashed into one of the towers of the World Trade Center. It wasn't long thereafter when we were notified that a second craft had crashed into the second tower of the World Trade Center, and it was immediately known to us that our country was under attack. How did that make me feel? It broke my heart, and here's the reason why. Coming from the world of public service, law enforcement, I have a lot of friends who are first responders, and knowing that as people were fleeing the sea of this tragic event that happened in New York City, Washington, D.C., Pennsylvania, throughout the eastern seaboard of our country, I knew that first responders would be moving into a danger zone. As everyone else was running away from danger, people that I knew by trade were running into the danger area to do what they do, and that's provide services to people in need. When the first tower went down on that day, it broke my heart, knowing that people, just like people who service in central Missouri every day, whether it be EMS, fire, law enforcement, it could have been anybody that I knew on that day that was crushed by that rubble. And I remember going back to my car and thinking about the events that had transpired on September 11, 2001, and tears coming to my eyes, knowing that this could happen anywhere USA. Columbia, Missouri, Jefferson City, Fulton, Boonville. It could happen anywhere, and the same thing would take place. People that are friends, that we know and trust, that serve us all, would lose their lives. And because of that, many people became mobilized and became dedicated to training and educating not only our first responders, but our communities as to how to better prepare and take care of themselves in case of another major event, whether it's natural or caused by the hatred of others. Preparing our communities to deal with these events, and something that can happen every day. Joplin, Missouri, recent example of a natural event that mobilized a nation. Tonight's panel consists of some individuals that are very knowledgeable in the area of response and education and everything there is to know about responding to a natural event, just such as Joplin, responding to an event such as the World Trade Center. I'm going to go down the line here. First, I want to introduce Mark Kilpatrick. Mark, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I am the communications officer for the Columbia-Boone County Office of Emergency Management. I've worked at that office now for 23 years. In that office, we also have a dual role. We also maintain the Public Safety Joint Communications Center, and that's the 911 and Emergency Dispatch Center for the Columbia and Boone County. So we are quite busy in that office.
Lisa Binkley. Lisa, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm the Mass Care Coordinator for Region F, 13 counties in mid-Missouri. I work to strengthen the capabilities for mass care in each of the counties in the region, and also to provide educational information to citizens on better ways that they can prepare themselves for a disaster.
Now, Lisa, it's interesting. I received one of our volunteer notifications that you were looking for some assistance in this area with a program called Safe Sunday.
Right.
And we're going to talk about that, but I responded to you in email saying, Lisa, I would really like to get involved with this. And you returned my email. You made my day. You made me the happiest guy in Columbia. Just to have the opportunity to not only meet you, but become involved with Safe Sunday. It's a great program. We'll talk more about that.
Okay.
Melissa.
Good evening. Melissa Friel, and I am the Director of the Center for Emergency Response and Terrorism for the Missouri Department of Health and Senior Services. And we're the public health emergency management arm of state government, and it's our duty to support the local efforts and make sure they have what they need to respond to all public health emergencies, which when you talk about man-made or natural disasters, all of those do affect public health. We also have a very important task of helping our citizens become better prepared for any and all disasters.
Knowledge is power, Melissa.
It certainly is, and it's, that's the one thing our citizens can do is they can be prepared. They can build a kit, they can find out what to do in an emergency, and they can have a plan for how they're going to take care of themselves and their families.
Exactly. Chief Scott Olson, welcome, sir. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. I'm Scott Olson. I'm the fire chief with the Boone County Fire Protection District. It's the third largest department in the state of Missouri. It's a predominantly a volunteer fire department. And I'm also the sponsoring agency chief for Missouri Task Force 1, one of the 28 FEMA Urban Search and Rescue task forces in this country. I've been actively involved in the provision of emergency services, but also emergency preparedness throughout the years. I've served as chair of our local emergency planning committee. I've served as co-chair of the Boone County School Emergency Planning Group. I've been actively involved in hospital emergency preparedness here in our community, and then of course actively involved in disaster response, responding to both disasters within the state and within our nation.
Scott, Task Force 1, Missouri Task Force 1, you're nationally recognized for the work that you've done. What does that mean for you as the CEO of such an outstanding organization?
Well, it means a lot to me because I was one of the founding members of that organization. A small group of people had an idea, wanted to essentially have a capability here in central Missouri that actually could respond to events in the central U.S. Of course, the issue that we were looking at that time were earthquakes down in the New Madrid fault area, New Madrid seismic zone, and the lack of these types of teams within the central U.S. Most of the USAR task forces are on the east and west coast. So it was a very dedicated effort by a lot of people in our department, and it came to fruition only 2 years later after we started, and we were designated as the 26th team. There were 25 teams at the time. We were designated as the 26th team to become a FEMA essentially certified team to respond to disasters nationally.
I've really had some great opportunities in my career, and one of them was having the opportunity to train people from DMORT 7, the Midwest region of DMORT, and the focus was NIMS, was incident management. And again, we're talking about a group of individuals with a mandate in response. For our listening public that doesn't know, there are two phases, and the first phase being crisis management, and then the second phase being recovery. And most of the time, most of our efforts have to fall into the recovery phase. Mark, in the case of a major event, you work in dispatch. That's your area. That's where calls for service really initiate. And then from you, you're reaching out to resources throughout the community. How hectic can it be in the event of a mass incident?
In a case of a mass incident, it can be extremely overwhelming. We have a normal workflow, and we are staffed and with the capability to handle that and to handle the most busy times that we have. But it's like with any kind of preparation, there can be incidents that will happen that will just completely overwhelm you, and you won't be able to meet all the needs. We try to avoid that, but it is possible it can happen, but there's a lot of times that we do have backup capabilities that we can draw on. We have staff that we can call in, but we do plan for that.
In a major event, it's controlled chaos to
Yes,
a
sir.
certain degree.
It is.
Chief, responding to a mass event, how chaotic is it? You've been dispatched. How chaotic can it be on scene?
Well, it's very chaotic. Having been to these disasters like Hurricane Katrina and Hurricane Ike, and even smaller disasters like the Elks Lodge collapse in Clinton, Missouri, here back in 2007. The scenes can be very chaotic. The utilization of an incident management system is actually very critical, and that's one of the reasons why the Department of Homeland Security essentially came out and said, we have to have an incident management system and everybody needs to use it.
We went to a standardized national incident management system, which was, in my opinion, probably one of the best things we did as a nation to become more prepared, was the standardized NIMS.
But the issue that we still face is that people don't get experience in responding to disasters.
Correct.
Only a very select group of people, if you really look at it, get experience in responding to disasters. And so one of the things that we've been proposing here recently is kind of pushing these incident support teams or incident management teams, that they go to these sorts of things. They're people from typically larger departments that have the extra training, typically have larger type events that occur on a somewhat regular basis, and then they go to either state or national events, and they essentially keep their skills up in managing these sorts of incidents. And they really assist the locals in managing the event. They don't come in and take over, but they assist them. They share their experiences. They help them understand what sorts of things that they're now facing and what they're going to face in the future.
Melissa, how important is it to mobilize groups like your CERT teams, which are your community emergency response teams? How important is the role that community-based teams like CERT bring to the resource table?
I think their service is invaluable. We have our paid professional emergency responders, and they're a phenomenal group of men and women, but they can't do it all. So the community organizations that are trained, like the CERT teams, are crucial to success and to the synergistic effort of protecting those and saving lives and helping those who are affected by disasters.
Lisa, we understand the chaos that can be associated with a major event of any kind, especially mass casualty event. What's the one thing that citizens can do to better prepare?
Well, Marco, if they have a plan and they've reviewed that plan with their family, it may put less stress on the first responder community, because they're not contacting the first responders, they're not calling 911 about a child that maybe they need to be reunited. If they've put a plan together, then they know where they're going to reunite. They've talked to their child about meeting them at a designated area to make sure everything's okay. So putting that plan together is so important.
We're coming up to September 11th, 2011, the 10th year anniversary of September 11th, 2001. Ready in 3 is a program that was developed by who?
Well, by the Missouri Department of Health and Senior Services. We're really fortunate to have that material available through our state agency.
Describe to us what Ready in 3 really is.
Well, it means taking 3 steps. And the first one is putting together a plan, and the second one is putting together a supplies kit, making sure you have some supplies if you need to grab it and run, or if you need to shelter in place in your home. Do you have some extra supplies on hand, some water, some food, flashlight, batteries, radio so you can communicate with the outside, those types of things. Putting the medications, reading glasses, some things specific for your family, and putting those together. And then the third one is knowing to listen to that radio for emergency information that would come to you through the media and that type of thing, and knowing what steps to take and follow after that.
If the power's out, Mark, how are we going to get information out to our responders from our centralized dispatch areas? How are we going to get information out?
Well, for the event of power failures, everything that we have has backup power. Usually it's generator, or we also have some that are battery backup. So we have addressed that contingency. And it's like what Lisa was talking about, making these plans. We also exercise these plans. So we routinely, as part of our normal operations, we put these backup systems in place. We test them. We don't just put them in place and then hope that they work when we need them. They're actually exercised on a regular cycle basis so that we can be confident that when we need them in an emergency, they're going to be there and they're going to be up and running.
Okay. We have all these plans in place, response plans. Every county in the state of Missouri has a plan in place. How often do we get together and through the NIM system really actually do tabletop exercises to keep our level of preparedness at the utmost, at the highest level possible?
Well, we do a lot, actually.
Okay.
And we do a lot in a lot of different venues. Mark and the folks at the Office of Emergency Management do and host a lot of different tabletops and actually host actual full-scale exercises. Our local emergency planning committee does the same thing in concert with the Office of Emergency Management, doing hazmat, weapons of mass destruction type drills. Our school emergency planning group did drills, not only tabletops, but actually full-scale exercises, active shooter drills with law enforcement and then school officials in all the school districts in Boone County. So these sort of activities occur quite often, and I think Mark could probably even address that further.
Right. We are actually mandated to by the federal government to have a set training plan, and that includes everything from discussions and tabletops all the way up to full-scale exercises. And then in our Office of Emergency Management, we also support the agencies in the area that also have similar mandates. For example, last September we had a full-scale exercise at Columbia Regional Airport to help the airport meet a requirement by the FAA that they actually exercise their emergency plan. And all the local fire departments, the CERT teams were involved, and that was we took advantage of a mandate for the airport, for the FAA, to exercise our plans. And even though a lot of us had already met our training requirements for the year, it was still an opportunity for everybody in the community to get together and work. And that's a real benefit we have in Central Missouri, is that we have a regional approach, and we work together and we exercise together and plan together, so that when the events do happen, we know who the other players are that are coming from the surrounding communities, and we know who we're working with.
You know, as a trainer, I kind of have this little saying that I live by, and that's the body can't go where the mind hasn't been. Basically, if you aren't mentally and emotionally prepared, because let's face it, in the case of an active shooter, you have someone that's actively participating in violence upon a confined group of students. As a parent, emotionally, you know, this is a crazy point in time. How do you prepare mentally and emotionally for what could take place?
Well, I think you have to practice. I think you have to, number one, you have to have a plan, you have to have policies and procedures, and then you have to exercise them. You know, tabletops all the way to full-scale exercises. That's the only way you know what the reactions are going to be and how people are going to respond, and where you can make corrections in those plans in order to make them better.
And that's something we do address. We do the after-action reports, and not only do we review our own after-action reports, we review the after-action reports of other communities that have had these incidents.
And learn by their mistakes.
And learn from their mistakes and what they've done well. And it seems like every time that something big has happened, we learn something that we can implement into our own local plans, so that we don't have to learn it the hard way.
Melissa, are you involved in developing policy at the state level?
That's a little above my pay grade.
I don't buy that for 1 second. I bet you have some input, though.
Well, you know, it's we are the emergency management arm of public health, and you know, we're really trying to help the locals become better prepared and prepare for the response of the state. The state had a pretty significant response during Joplin. You spoke of Region 7 DMORT. We activated Region 7 DMORT and made sure they had what they needed to do to meet the fatalities needs,
Right.
and to help identify those who were lost. The week before, ironically, and actually huge benefit, the week before the Joplin tornado, we had the national level exercising an earthquake incident. Many of the medical assets were still up at the Branson Airport where they'd been exercised, and we were able to deploy those to Joplin within a couple of days. So once again,
Couldn't have worked out any better.
no, it really was fortuitous timing, and
Sure.
we just exercised our local disaster mortuary team and our disaster medical assistance team during that exercise. So really able to put what we learned in those exercises to use in Joplin.
Lisa, talk to us about the 3 steps for preparedness, the ready in 3. What do they involve?
Well, really you have 2 different types of things that your family might do in a disaster. You're either going to shelter in place in your home or work or school, wherever you are, or you're going to evacuate.
Who decides whether or not you're going to shelter in place or move?
Well, it may be up to you yourself, maybe the parent or whatever. It may be from information that you get from your emergency management agency. And you know, if they tell you that you need to, our law enforcement may even come and tell you need to evacuate your neighborhood. And
Really kind of depends on the event.
That's exactly
that's going to
right.
govern whether or not you shelter in place or
exactly
move.
right.
But now, ready in 3 consists of 3 steps
Right.
and three separate components, really, isn't it?
Right. So if you put together a plan with those 2 steps in mind, either sheltering in place or evacuation, and if you think through the different types of man-made or natural disasters that might occur, whether it be a fire in your, in a single-family dwelling, or if it be a larger type disaster that involves your neighborhood or maybe the whole city that you live in, you're going to think about the steps and make some notes and talk it over with your family. Oftentimes we feel that we don't want to discuss it with our family, our children, but they go through tornado drills and fire drills in schools, and so even in daycare, so they're familiar with those steps and the practicing, just like Scott said. So
I try to know where my children are at all times. I don't care how old they are. It's difficult, though, isn't it? Then you add the chaos of a major event. I just can't imagine. I can't imagine. And that's why it's important that I think as a community we understand the dynamics of response, and chaos has to run a certain form. It has its own ebbs and flows. Chief, what can you tell us about the dynamics of a major event? Let's pick an event, whatever you want to talk about, but there are certain dynamics on that incident.
Well, there are a couple things. First off, what I want your viewers to realize is that it can happen here.
Absolutely.
And people need to know that we are obviously at risk for tornadoes. We're obviously at risk for ice storms. We're obviously at risk for other sorts of either man-made or natural events. But first off, let's take it seriously. It can happen here. The sorts of things that occur or potentially occur after these sorts of events are the issues related to, are people prepared, are they not prepared? And then those people that are not prepared end up being essentially a further drag on the system. We need people to know that you need to have at least 3 days worth of supplies, because in a widespread event, you can be on your own for a while. You may not be the one that's most hurt or in the most needed, that there may be others that are needier than you or need more assistance than you. So you may need to be on your own for a while. We saw that driving into New Orleans for Hurricane Katrina. There were clearly people that were trapped in their attics with water up to the eaves that needed our assistance immediately. There were lots of people that were on the roadway that had no water, had no food, and were looking for handouts. They weren't prepared. It's really important that people take the sorts of things that are being developed by the state, especially this Ready in 3 program, which is, like I said, is so fortunate it came out of the state of Missouri. It's a very simple program. It's very easy to understand. It's just a matter of doing it.
Some of the basic elements just to sustain yourself for a few days. Water. What are your recommendations for water per person per day?
You should really have a gallon of water per person per day. Another interesting tip is just fill your tub full of water, because you can use that for flushing your toilets. I mean, you can boil it for potable water to drink, but minimally 1 gallon per family member for 3 days.
Electricity goes out. What do you recommend?
Flashlights are best. Candles cause, and I'm sure the chief can speak to this more effectively than I.
Additional headaches?
Oh, yeah, cause fires. So candles, or excuse me, flashlights would be best. You know, if you have a generator, make sure it's hooked up correctly, and it's, you know, we see
It's
people
outside the structure.
right. Carbon monoxide poisoning is a real issue,
And
and
you have fuel for it.
yeah.
Food, canned food, dried food, any recommendations?
Canned food, and make sure you have a can opener. You know,
That doesn't run on
yeah,
electricity?
push that little button and it doesn't go, then you have canned food, it's no
right.
good for you. So make sure it's non-perishable food and change it out because it does have an expiration date on it. So does water.
What's the life of bottled water?
Bottled water is good for about 6 months, and then you need to change it out. Whenever you change your smoke detector battery, you should change your water out.
I don't think a lot of people really know that water will go bad. And most of the time it's the containment that it's in, the leach factor of the containment. What else do you recommend?
Well,
We need to sustain ourselves for 3 days,
So-
if not longer.
right, so think about that. Do you have a pet? Do you have, are you on medications that you require on a daily basis? Those are things to think about. Do you have home health services coming to your home? Those folks that receive services or on oxygen or dialysis, they need to take a few extra steps and think about what they might need, and if they didn't have transportation to get to their dialysis, or if they didn't have their home health care services coming in.
Lisa, who can people contact for more information about Ready in 3?
About Ready in 3, they can go to the Missouri Department of Health and Senior Services website, which is health.mo.gov, and click onto the Ready in 3, and there's a lot of material available. The planning guides for families, and they have cards in there to document all of the information for your family. Contact your cell phone numbers, information on contacts. And also, they have some cards specifically for pets and those other services that I mentioned.
It's an outstanding package.
It is, and it's also available in several languages, and Braille, and for the hearing impaired.
Perfect. Melissa. Second time I've done it, I apologize. If our communities need assistance, CERT, training, whatever, are you the go-to person?
Actually, it would be your local emergency manager.
Okay.
Zim Swartz here in Boone
In
County.
Mark's office?
You know, they're your go-to person. They're going to help you become better prepared, and they're going to work with the volunteers to make sure they have the training they need to.
I'm impressed with the CERT program. I think that's really neat, the way we can train and mobilize our community. Mark, how do we get a hold of you to learn more?
Our office is part of the City of Columbia. You can reach us through our website at www.gocolumbiamo.com, or our phone number is 573-874-7400.
Chief, last word. Any wisdom you want to leave us with?
No, I think you just need to take advantage of these programs, certainly take them seriously. Disasters do happen. We've seen it here, not just in our country, but in Missouri, in our area. So it can happen to us.
I think this is a topic that we want to address further. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us this evening. And Columbia, thank you.